Thank you, Abby. It is really amazing to be here because this is, of course, one of the most wonderful, beautiful, well-run galleries in the universe, not just in Colorado Springs. And thank you all for being here. It is just truly an honor to be able to get to talk to you about my work and to get your feedback. It's just a joy to share it. And if you notice that my family's not here, it's because they make me nervous. And they've heard all my stories, so they don't really want to hear them anymore. So this body of work kind of began about 6 years ago, but what you're seeing here is 2 years worth of work. My last solo exhibit was 2 years ago. And so I'm going to give you kind of a little history of where I'm at with my artwork and talk some inspiration things and some technical things, and then let you ask whatever questions you might have. So I was teaching at Pikes Peak State College 6 years ago, art appreciation, and I was teaching them about printmaking. And I had not done any printmaking since 30 years ago, one class in college. But I'd always taken pictures of trees. I was never going to paint the trees, because I pretty much considered myself an abstract painter. But I was teaching about printmaking, and there was this light bulb moment of, that would be the perfect medium for the tree roots. Mm-hmm. And so I started digging through, my archives of tree pictures, and I started doing linoleum block prints. And so these 4 pieces over here are linoleum block prints. And if you are not familiar with that, it is a carving. Traditionally would have been done in wood. The Japanese did wood block prints, been done for thousands of years. Anyway, I brought these along because sometimes people are like, carving? Really? So some show and tell, you can pass them around. And so these are actually 3 of the pieces are up here. And I was really enjoying those and kind of getting into really making them really intricate and beautiful. And one of my sons said, gosh, it'd be really cool if these could be really big. I'm like, yeah, but I don't have a printmaking studio, and I don't have a big press. At that point, I was printing everything by hand, like rubbing after the carving. So I'm not doing that anymore. I did have a large relief press made for me, but at the time I was like, I can't do these bigger. Right? But as a painter, I love color. And there was this sense that you do want to do more with this look, with this idea. And so the second piece from the left over there was my first painting that kind of incorporated the look of a lino cut with acrylic paint. Part of what made this possible, I called Golden Acrylics and I'm like, this is what I want to do. And they said, we have this new product, So Flat. And it's this paint called So Flat. It's totally opaque. And without that paint, I would not have been able to do these pieces. So I got the So Flat paint. It wasn't even available in Colorado yet. And I basically did my drawing and then painted the areas that would have been like the inked areas in the lino cut. And then because I really wanted kind of luminous color to be coming out from underneath, so to speak, I did first washes of acrylic paint. Now it looks like watercolor, but it's actually many, many layers of transparent acrylic paint. This wouldn't be possible with watercolor because watercolor will lift up. And so you can do a little bit of layering with watercolor, but not to this extent. So that's what it is. It's first this drawing, and then it's painting with that opaque paint to create the look of the lino cut. And then it's these washes of color and layers to create that luminosity so that it looks like light is coming through that. And then painting over the dark areas again to rebalance everything. And then more layers of color until I get to the point where I have a finished work. So that was the first one. And then I was like, wow, this was really cool, but that was really time consuming. and how do I make this more efficient? So I've worked with various materials to kind of try and cut down that time, because even with cutting down time, each painting is taking about 3 months. And that is not 3 months only working on that piece. I usually have about 3 pieces going on in my studio at a time, but it's a long process. So the 5 to the left here are on wood panels. This one is kind of a new thing in that it's on a watercolor ground canvas. And there is my, woohoo, this makes it easier. So because on the others I was basically having to create a ground, a surface to paint on that would absorb like watercolor. And with this prepared watercolor ground canvas, that has eliminated a huge amount of time in preparing that surface for painting. Okay, so now you're going, but what about this? Because this is not at all what these paintings are. Oh, and sorry, let me get to that in just a second. So when I talk about doing washes of color, I'm basically starting with just really, really basic, large swaths of color across the surface to start laying it down, and then working through to more and more detail with layers of transparent paint. So this piece here, and the one around the corner and the 2 over there, are more kind of traditional impasto technique, lots of layers, lots of texture. And part of the reason these pieces are in the show too is because I can't only do that. It's really, really, it's very, I have to concentrate. There's no room for error. There's no covering anything up, right? So that work takes a lot of focus. Whereas this to me is a messy painting. Like literally just, there's no mistakes here. There's no way to make mistakes here. It's just whatever happens, happens. Just keep painting until it looks right. So that's why, in this show, I have really 3 different techniques going on. The trees obviously have gone a long way for me in terms of kind of becoming metaphors for life and for our existence and the complexity of that. Most of these trees are nearly dead. And those are the really interesting ones. They're so fascinating. But they all have this little bit of life in them, which makes them just really wonderful metaphors for our human existence. Then over in this corner, you see the MRI pieces, because we are organic matter too. And 2 years ago, I had an MRI because I have a spinal cord injury. And when I saw the MRI images, I was just fascinated because they are so much like the trees and roots that I had been working with. And so I wanted to do some paintings of those as well. And it's just amazing. It's amazing to look at that organic matter, whether it's in the plant life or in our own bodies. It's all very similar visually. So that's why we have those pieces over there. I think that was kind of what I had in mind for sharing with you, but I am completely open to questions, so ask whatever you'd like.
Mine, it's about where these trees, were these real trees, and where are they? And
yeah, in some ways these are tree portraits, in the sense these are real trees. Some of them people have recognized. Like, they're like, that's my tree that I climbed on as a kid. I'm like, yes, that's the location. So these are real trees. I do take photographs when I'm out hiking. Some of them are Colorado trees, and you can probably tell which ones are which. But there's also quite a few from the Pacific Northwest. And yeah, so there's a wonderful forest between Highway 1 and the ocean up in Oregon that some friends took us out to specifically so that I could see the trees. And you know, we do in my family, if I say I'm going tree hunting, everyone knows what that means, because hikes are kind of like tree hunting. We're looking for the unique ones out there. And I have some friends who have invited me to hike with them, and they're like real go-getters. They're out there to get their exercise, and no, I'm out there to examine things and to peek behind and to, you know, get down on the ground and look up and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Other questions?
So your process for this one with the watercolor background, was it the same essentially, or did you have to layer that many blacks on top of black the same way that you did over here?
Yeah, so the painting process is exactly the same. But with the other ones on the panels, I actually had to prepare the panels with a watercolor ground, which requires multiple layers. Every layer has to dry for 3 days first. So that was like literally 9 days of just preparing the surface. So to have a canvas that already had a watercolor ground on it was just amazing. And it's really smooth. It's amazingly smooth. It's really pleasing to work with. So yeah, just cutting down that prep time is pretty big. Yes?
Do any of those processes change the intensity of your end colors, or is it just a matter of what you're choosing?
No, the colors are essentially the same, and the ground, the stuff that I was putting on the wood surfaces, essentially was giving them the same absorbency as this. When I select colors, I'm looking for a number of things. For every piece, I do little experiments. In fact, these were some of my experiments for it. When you're working with transparency, you really have to be very careful to use colors that won't muddy. Because I want the light to shine through them. I want them to be very vibrant. And so I kind of test out different colors. And so I get a palette that I feel really good about. It's going to be vibrant. It's going to be unique to that painting. And 4 of the 6 on this wall actually were only done with 3 colors. So a primary yellow, red, and blue. And they're different pigments. They're not all the same because we have many reds, we have many yellows, we have many blues. But if you look at the one on the far left, that was such a complex image that I wanted the colors to be harmonious. And so by only using 1 yellow and 1 red and 1 blue, as you mix those and you get all of the colors, they're very, very harmonious and they work really well together. Which made that, I think that painting could have been very jarring and actually unpleasant to look at. But by using really harmonious colors and allowing those to blend well, it's for me a very pleasing effect. Yeah.
Do you work from one photographic composition, or do you take the tree from multiple angles to get a sense of it? Like, are these more like composite from like one angle, or how do you approach it?
I take tons of pictures. I usually crop and select the one that I feel like is the most expressive, except for this painting. This tree was so tall that I actually couldn't take a picture of it. So I did the video thing on my phone and was like, and I didn't, like, when I was doing that, I didn't think in terms of this is going to become a painting. But when I decided that I wanted to paint it, you know, you can't like use this video thing to draw from, right? It's like crazy. And so I had to do screenshots of different sections of the tree and then print those and then kind of splice them together. Maybe some techie person could have done this better, but I had to kind of put them together to come up with this. Now, this is nowhere near, like, this tree is so tall that it doesn't do it justice at all. I wish it was like 4 times taller. But so for most of them, I select one of many and then I crop it, etc., before I do my drawing. This one was unique. Yeah.
The texture in that
so it's not just paint, in that there are, so golden acrylics has a lot of textured mediums, we call them mediums, that you can add to paint, or you can put on the surface by themselves. So they have one that will make the surface feel like concrete. And then they have some that just have granules in them. And so I've used, I think, 3 different types of materials in this, and partly because, I mean, the trees have so much texture, they're so fascinating. And and because sorry, I like things that shimmer, you know, I mean, like, that's why I liked the circus, because there was lots of glitter, right? So there's, you know, there are little ones that are like clear crystals in there too, to kind of help create that sense of light shimmering through those leaves. Yeah, there's a lot of products now. That's one of the weird things about being an artist in this time period, is there's so many products that you almost have to be like, nope, I'm not going to use all the stuff they're trying to sell me.
It's almost like hair.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So when you do like a painting like that, so you first you'll lay down those colors that we're talking about, and then you go in with the black? Or do you do the black and then the color, or do you kind of?
I go back and forth. So I do the drawing, and I'm going to not say black, because it's actually a mixture of Payne's Gray and Sienna brown. And so I paint that on. So we basically have something that looks like a lino cut, and then I start doing color, and then I paint the dark opaque areas again. So the dark opaque areas get painted 3 times. And there's up to 12 to 14 layers of color.
You know, I know some of the process because we've talked about it quite a bit, but you know, I don't think, I mean, these are like, you should see the process that she puts these things through. It goes like, and it goes, and it goes, and it goes until it's just right. And to me, they're just amazing studies of just, of what they are, but also a certain perseverance and insistence on something. Like you're insisting on something. And it's very compelling.
Thank you.
Yes.
What Wendy knows is that I'll shoot out a text to her and a couple other artists and say, is it done? And they'll be like, yeah, maybe. And then I'll work on it for another 3 weeks. My end game with each piece is really, really time consuming, because there is a point where, I mean, well, these pieces could actually never be done, but there is a point where I'm like, okay, now there's enough intensity of color, there's a good balance of color, I like, you know, where the emphasis is, I like how the movement of light through the piece is happening. So there's a lot of things that I'm looking for to call it finished. Yeah.
So how much is intuitive and how much is planned?
Maybe 50-50, in the sense that, I mean, you know, I am planning my color scheme, I am planning my composition, but once those things are determined, the rest is pretty intuitive. Yeah. In fact, I was talking to someone recently, and I was describing when I was an art student, and I was listening to this artist talk one time, and this woman was describing, she did really intricate paintings, and she was describing working from the upper left corner to the bottom right corner. That's not me. I'm all over the place. And yeah.
Well, your work is very precise.
Right,
So
right.
It
So
still allows for the intuitive,
yeah.
you know, one stroke begets the next.
Well, and because you have to think, I mean, so I was in college 30 years ago. My art education was all about abstract expressionism, and put paint here and put paint there and be expressive and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to not do that, even when you're working in a tight way. I mean, there's still kind of this, like, oh, well, look, I'm going to throw something there, but oh, now I got to balance it over there. So it is, yeah. Other questions?
That's good.
Thank you all. Great questions.